In this Salts Done at Home tutorial, we're going to be taking a lump of clay, making a sweet little pinch pot, and then if you make two of those, making this sweet little hollow orb. We're going to be using just a couple of easy tools that you probably have at home or something that will stand in for these tools. The first thing that you're going to need is a serrated rib. You can also use a regular fork that you have in your cutlery drawer. We'll be using a smooth rib, ideally one that is a little bit flexible like the silicone one, but in a pinch you can totally just use your fingers, or a stick like this one that you might have had from your pottery tool kit, and you'll use the back side of it, and again in a pinch you can just use a spoon. You'll also need a pin tool, or some other, like a large needle will work just fine as well. And then finally you'll need some small vessel to put some water in and a sponge. I prefer not to put water directly on my hand building projects and instead use a sponge so that I don't add too much. Okay, so our first project is going to be a basic pinch pot, and then one little thing that you can do with a basic pinch pot. So first of all, you're going to need some clay. I'm starting with a relatively small ball of clay. You can kind of see how it fits in my hand for scale. And I definitely recommend that you start small if you've never made a pinch pot. They seem easy, but they're not always as easy as you think. You have to really control the pressure that you're putting on it. So the first thing you're going to do is tuck your thumb right into the center of the ball, just like that. You'll notice that I've already pinched just a little bit on this side. That's fine. Next, you're going to, putting your thumb back inside that hole, you're going to start pinching while you turn it with your other hand. So you can kind of see how that's starting to look, where it gets a little thinner on the side that you've pinched. We're going to go all the way around, and then we're going to go around again. I'm keeping the walls relatively straight. You can see how straight the walls are. And once the hole is big enough, I'm going to put both thumbs inside and pinch with my fingertips down at the bottom so that the floor of my pinch pot doesn't stay too thick. So you're just going to pinch all the way around. Once you start to get your walls to a nice thinness, you want to be careful about not allowing it to become too thin, because then they're going to crack more easily. But once you start to get a tolerable thinness, and this can be kind of a nice thickness. I know it looks kind of thick here, but for your first pinch pot, this is great, especially for kids. Keeping it a little thicker is a good idea. Then you can change the shape of it if you want to. This is a fine shape to work with if you want to, or you can kind of tap it on your table to flatten out the bottom so that it won't be so wobbly. You can straighten up the walls some more and start to make more of a traditional pot shape. There are a ton of things that you can make out of a basic pinch pot. The project for today, I've made two matching pinch pots right here, and we're going to meld these together to make an orb. From here you can make all kinds of cool stuff with an orb. So we're going to start by scoring, and this is my scoring tool. Many of you will have something kind of like this. If you don't have a serrated rib or some other scoring tool, you can just grab your needle tool and just score the edges just with your needle tool. If you don't have a needle tool, a fork will work great. But you're going to make sure that you score thoroughly on both sides of where you'll be attaching these bowls together. So now I've scored both of my sides. I have a little bowl of water with a sponge. I'm going to use just a damp sponge to add a little bit of wetness to that scored edge, not a lot. From here, you're going to line up the edges of your bowls and just kind of press them together. If they don't line up perfectly, you can kind of see that seam there. It's a little bumpy, that's fine. you're going to have plenty of time to make it match up. But what you want to do right now is just very gently cupping your hands to hold the pots in your palms. You're going to kind of press them together without using too much pressure. Younger kids may need a little bit of help with this part. But once they're pretty well stuck together, you have a lot of nice positive air pressure from the inside. So you can actually put some, not a ton, of pressure on the outside without totally collapsing it. So from here, you can use your finger, you can use a rib, you can use the back of a throwing stick, or you can even just use a spoon that you have in your drawer to start to seal over the seam. And you'll just go all the way around. You don't worry about it being kind of messy at first. That actually helps if the seam is a little bit messy at first, and then you'll go back and clean it up some more. So just go turning it gently in your hands. I'm not putting a ton of pressure on here, but I'm putting enough that I can move that clay around. If your clay is a little stiffer, that you can put a little bit more pressure on it without collapsing it, and you'll need to because it's a little stiffer. My clay is a bit on the wet side, which is generally what I prefer, but can be a little harder to work with if you don't have quite as much motor control. Like if you're a younger kid trying to do this, a little bit stiffer clay will probably help. You can also let your pinch pots dry a bit, not a long time, but say a half an hour to an hour will make them a little easier to work with. So now I've sealed over that seam. You can't really see it anymore, but my orb here it still looks a little rough on the outside. The best thing to do from here is to let it dry and then come back and work with it once it's leather hard to smooth out the sides. And we'll talk more about that in the next video. Oh, don't forget, at this stage, you need to poke a hole in your closed form, in your orb, so that it doesn't blow up in the kiln. Don't forget that part.